Many of us need to better understand the Midwest, I think. The middle section of our country isn't heard from enough. And to do that, you really need to spend time in the heartland so you can hear and feel the pulse of the heartland. So please listen to what's happening in Dubuque, Iowa, where people I've met have quite a story to tell.
You know, a lot of communities of this size are shrinking.
Brad Pinchuk runs Hirschbach Trucking Company in Dubuque, Iowa, with 2,000 climate-controlled, refrigerated trucks moving products like food throughout the U.S. Pinchuk says Hirschbach quadrupled in size the last 6 years, hitting the $500 million mark in revenue. Especially hot was the first quarter of 2018.
Busiest first quarter I've ever seen in my 27 years. Unprecedented. The economy was strong. You know, we had the tax cuts that kind of stimulated the economy.
The company's been around 80 years, but its corporate headquarters are anything but old. It's fresh and decidedly hip here.
You like what you, right?
It's pretty cool, sure.
Yeah, it is.
I like that one.
I like that.
I grew up in Chicago. My wife grew up in Minneapolis. So we're from big cities. I didn't think that I would really necessarily like being in a smaller community.
But like it, he does. Built into massive rock bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River, Dubuque's full of surprises.
You know, the rest of the Midwest is flat as a pancake, and it's interesting. The glaciers came down and flattened the entire Midwest, but missed this little pocket here where Iowa and Illinois and Wisconsin converge.
I've been caught off guard by Dubuque, by the vibrancy and the optimism of its people. Go back 30 years, though, and this was a completely different scene.
In the 1980s, Dubuque had the highest unemployment rate in the country at 23%.
Just ask longtime city manager Mike Van Milligan.
So we were on the front edge of this whole Rust Belt, Midwestern cities having a lot of problems. And in the 80s, the community lost 10% of its population because there were no jobs, so people were leaving in droves.
Trying to find a part-time job was ridiculous.
Newspaper editor Amy Gilligan is a born and bred Dubuquer.
When I was in high school, in 1982, I was one of 500 people who stood in line in January to try to fill out an application to be a waitress.
But there's probably 10 or 12 communities in the Midwest that have similar experiences. The difference for Dubuque was the community didn't accept it. And one of the first things that happened was the plan identified that we didn't have any industrial parks. We couldn't get a private developer to do it, so the mayor and city council partnered with the county, the Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, which is a private not-for-profit, and went out and bought over 1,000 acres of land and built industrial parks. And now there's almost 5,000 jobs in those industrial parks.
In the 90s, the focus turned to what was Dubuque's most underutilized asset, the river.
My husband and I had a party at our house that was to raise awareness and to start the fundraising process for riverfront development.
We partnered with the Dubuque County Historical Society, and they built a $100 million National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium.
Community leaders, including the Telegraph Herald, started to say, okay, and now what? This isn't our time to sit back and rest on our laurels.
Gritty Dubuque developer John Gronin took a gamble early on, restoring instead of tearing down some of the once majestic buildings.
We deliberately went out and said, if we're creating a movie set here, what does that look like? What's the tenant mix? What's going to be that critical mass of vibrant businesses that are going to bring people here?
Over 50 different partnerships have been painstakingly forged, bringing capital and progress.
And sometimes it takes a couple of years to figure that out, but that's when you work on your state historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits, and it takes multiple layers of funding oftentimes to do these projects.
Since 1982, unemployment has dropped from 23% to 2%, and the county's population has grown from 92,000 to 97,000.
The economy's a lot more diverse now than it was then.
The 17-square block Millwork District used to house factories that shuttered long ago.
So we had the two world's largest door and sash manufacturers My wife and I bought this building, which is a full block of buildings that were built from 1860 something, and the roofs were collapsing in many areas, filled with pigeons.
We were ranked the 6th brainiest place in the United States. There's over 300,000 college students within 100 miles of Dubuque. And that's one of the reasons about 10 years ago, IBM located a division of their corporation here.
And that pigeon-filled factory from the 1800s, well, today there's a wait list for the apartments there. And one of its tenants, Brazen Restaurant, earned international acclaim when its owner, Kevin Scharf, was profiled on Bravo's Top Chef program in 2018.
Mississippi River way back there. Can you see that blue?
And it turns out I'm not the only one nosing around Dubuque. 30 different cities have come here to see what all the buzz is about.
We had a city in Canada that chartered a jet and brought 30 people for a day just to see what we were doing.
Awards are accumulating, and none more prominent than the 4 All-America City Awards between 2007 and 2017.
We don't see a lot of obstacles necessarily. I mean, there are obstacles, but go around them, go above them, whatever the case may be. We have a can-do attitude that, we have it in our business and our community has it.
Julie Peterson, Dubuque, Iowa.